how free-to-play friendly is Galbrena actually? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so, as we all know, Galbrena was recently revealed by Kuro Games, and we have a decent amount of information on her now. So now we must beg the question, is Galbrena a free-to-play friendly unit? And if so, then why? And if not, then also why? Well, I would make the proposition that she is free-to-play accessible. It just kind of depends on where you've put your investments. What I mean by that is that if you've been playing for a while and you have a certain set of 5-star characters, then I feel like Galbrena is going to feel very accessible to you. But if you haven't invested in that set of characters, then she's probably not even going to feel that inaccessible because she's still going to have options, but perhaps you might consider getting someone else. Essentially, I'd say that if you've invested a lot into fusions, you have a Lupa, you have a Brent, but you don't have the full triple fusion team, then yes, Galbrena is worth your time. Now, I do think that if you already have a full triple fusion team, then there's just not really much reason to get her, but that's besides the point. We're talking about her free-to-play friendliness here, and in terms of free-to-play friendliness, if you're somebody who has collected a couple of these units, then you're able to use them over using Choyuan. However, the thing is, most of the really good fusions are 5 stars, and because of that, that ends up not being that free-to-play friendly. Sure, Lupa is going to be running alongside her, and Brent Wuthering Waves has had numerous banners by this point, and there's also been an adequate amount of time to get Changli multiple times as well. However, the fact of the matter still stands. Those are multiple 5-star characters, and if you're collecting them all, chances are you're going for triple fusion. So, that's not exactly the most free-to-play friendly approach, and that is why I say that it's more so something you can consider if you've already invested into that direction. Though I assume that if you're investing into that direction, you already had something that you were planning to do in the first place. But either way, it's something you can consider, but it does dock some points for her free-to-play friendliness. Because no matter how good of a pull the individual fusion units are, the fact of the matter still stands that she primarily wants 5-star teammates. And if you're not getting those 5-star teammates, then you can consider getting Choyuan, who is also a 5-star teammate. Her teams just don't end up being that accessible. However, you have to remember, as long as it's not a negative status character, not having a 5-star teammate is not that bad of a detriment. Is it a detriment? Absolutely, and I'm not going to say that it's always a small one. However, it is undeniably going to be better than if you didn't have a 5-star teammate for a negative status character. You're still going to be better off. For example, in this case, you can still use more Teffy with her and use Shorekeeper in the 3rd slot. Is it going to be as strong as using the fusions or Choyuan? No, most likely not, but most people have Shorekeeper. She's accessible to literally every beginner player that starts the game, provided that they decide to pull for Shorekeeper as their limited 5-star that they can get from 1.x. And she's also had another rerun banner recently, so I feel like a majority of people should have her. Otherwise, Verena is obviously going to work, as she always has. So whenever you consider that, yes, she is going to have a free-to-play friendly team option, but how strong it's going to be, we'll see. I don't really think this is going to be an Augusta case where we have that perfect level of balance. And that's because we just don't really have a 4-star character that is on more Teffy's level, but is able to help out echo scale damage characters. If we ever did get that, that would be awesome, but I don't think we're going to do that, because then that's going to make Choyuan redundant. And if you're a free-to-play, unless you're just a big Choyuan simp such as myself, you're probably just not really going to be interested in getting him because he's on the more niche side. Is he a good unit? Absolutely. I don't want you thinking that Choyuan is bad. I have seen some people getting a bit worried that he's not really that good. Don't get that idea, he is a good character, but the issue is that he's definitely more on the niche side. He gets his personal job done well, but if you have no interest in that personal job, or you just think that it's too niche of an investment, and you're not really that big on Frolova or Galbrena, then he just ends up not really being all that worth it. So Galbrena ends up landing in this awkward position where she's not necessarily anti-free-to-play by any means, but she's definitely more on the costly side in terms of teammates. And that is why I say that it kind of depends on how long you've been playing. Wuthering Waves' pull count per patch is generally very good, and I do think that because of how many fusions we have, at this point you probably should have at least one, and if you don't, that's completely fine. There is much reason to have skipped them for whatever reason that may be. And you can save yourself making that investment by just going for Choyuan. And you could argue that it's nice that she's able to work with those other fusion characters, because it removes the pressure to go and invest in that direction. You don't have to get Choyuan. If you've already invested in the fusions, you're going to be fine. And I think that's generally a good thing. It is good on Kuro Games that they've made the unit accessible in that sense. And in that sense, you're also going to be able to save more Ashtrites and just invest more into Galbrena personally if you didn't already have any interest in Choyuan. You can also squeeze in the fusions in other ways. For example, Lupa into more Teffy into Galbrena, if you do have Lupa but you might not have the other two. There is ways to go about it, and there are workarounds, but I'm hesitant to call them free-to-play friendly, because generally speaking, when we say free-to-play friendly, what we really mean is the unit able to work cheaply? Can they work well on a 4-star and not feel really bad to use? I don't necessarily think Galbrena is going to feel bad on a cheap setup. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I'm sure she's going to feel just fine. But is she going to feel significantly weaker? Probably. I think Augusto is probably the most well-balanced unit in this sense. Mortefi is absolutely excellent for her, an amazing 4-star heavy attack buffer that is able to compensate for not having Yuno. However, Yuno is a fantastic unit and is a more than sufficient upgrade to your teams, while also just being a really good pull for your overall account if you have some certain teammates. So I would say that they did that amazingly, because that was a situation where literally everybody won. You could comfortably skip Yuno if you didn't really want her, and you could comfortably invest into her if you wanted your Yuno to reach max potential, and I personally think that's a very good thing. In this situation, it's kind of awkward to pull for Cho Yuen if you're not really committed to the Echo archetype, and if you're not really into that, then he just kind of ends up feeling a bit redundant to get on his own, especially if you have more limited resources, and Galbrena is already a somewhat redundant addition to the roster. Sure, she could end up being really, really strong, but you have to consider, basically every DPS is good these days. If they make a new DPS, they are going to be good. This is generally a very well-balanced game, and you can consider basically any DPS released in the last year or so, or if you want to push it a bit, then sure, the last 8-9 months, but generally, you get the point, they're going to be good. Simply having good damage is becoming less and less of a focal point for a character's value. Sure, it can definitely define a second slot teammate's value, because most of the time the damage is what makes him so flexible. Brent Wuthering Waves absolutely feels so much worse without a signature. And that's because it really gimps his damage. You're not able to build Tide Breaking as easily. Obviously, you can just use Blood Pact Pledge, but it's still not going to be anywhere as good as using Unflickering Valor. So in that case, yes, damage does count a lot. And in Yuno's case, damage does count a lot. That is a very large part of her value, and it's why she's able to freaking carry Gion in some cases. However, for a main DPS character in wuwa, you can basically always be rest assured that they're going to be good. So I wouldn't really say that you should pull for damage anymore, because we have plenty of high damaging options. That isn't really the only thing at this point. So I would say it's better to prioritize other things: Whimpering Wastes coverage, TOA coverage, Fusion Elements coverage, element coverage in general. You get the idea. There are plenty of different factors to cover here. And to put it into perspective for you, Carlotta released quite a while ago at this point, and she is still a very high damaging character. Seriously, they are never going to release a main DPS that is just bad. So if damage is your only concern, yes, she is going to do damage. And even if you're on a really cheap setup, I'm sure if you put in enough time and effort, you can compensate for your lack of investment with skill. Wuthering Waves has that nice quality, where if you're not really all that invested, you can still compensate for a lot of your damage loss by simply being good at the game, and just knowing good techniques and whatnot. But either way, you get the point. I wouldn't really put too much emphasis on the fact that she may have good damage, because, wow, big shocker. And we're very close to wuwa 3.x, and I guarantee you we're probably going to get even stronger DPSs when we head there. wuwa has very natural damage progression. The reason why I'm saying all this is because, sure, she might not have the free-to-play friendliest teams in the world, but I wouldn't really want damage to be used as a justification for it. Sure, it could be very good, but even if it is, yeah, sure, but everyone's damage is good. You could go for somebody that's far cheaper in cost, and you wouldn't even be missing out on that much DPS. Now, in Galbrena's case, if she does end up having very favorable damage, I will say that at least she's not negative status. Zanya and Cardathea are, and those two are like some of the top performing DPSs in the game right now. So sure, that is also something else that you could consider. But ultimately, do I think that Galbrena is a free-to-play friendly unit? Do I think that if a free-to-play is getting her, is she going to be worth your time? Well, she can use Static Mist most likely. All of the gun DPSs have been able to up until this point. And our teams, she has options at the very least. I personally think that this is definitely no Phoebe situation where, oh my goodness, you're getting the most bang for your asteroids that there has ever been. But I do think that if you're a free-to-play that's been playing for a while and you have certain investments, she's going to be a pretty good pickup for you. However, I would say that if you don't have those certain investments, I honestly think she's very passable. Is she gonna be good? Listen, it's Wuthering Waves. Every new release is good. You can literally go for everybody and feel guilt-free about it. I'm not really focusing on that so much as I'm focusing on her accessibility. I guarantee you she's going to still feel strong on a more Teffy Shorekeeper team, and she is definitely going to feel a lot better with a free-to-play setup compared to negative status characters with a free-to-play setup. And if that's what matters to you, then I think that Galbrena is going to be a perfectly good pickup. But I think that if you want the cheapest possible pickup, then Galbrena might not be the right choice, because there are other DPSs that are cheaper. For example, Carlotta is a good example of a very easily accessible DPS who has multiple second slot teammates that she can use, while also being able to use 4 stars like Yang Yang if you don't have any other options. You do have options of other DPSs. So, Do I think that you should get Galbrena in particular? Evaluate what you genuinely need. If you think that a fusion hypercarry is seriously the best investment for you, yes, go for it. But don't be baited by huge damage numbers whenever she comes out. Big shocker, it's Wuthering Waves. Everyone does well. There are layers to what makes a character a good investment. Damage on its own is not a very special thing anymore, so I would say that if you're looking for a free-to-play friendly character, Galbrena's not bad, but you can find better elsewhere. Hopefully this video is able to tell you whether Galbrena's free-to-play friendly or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and I'm sure that many of you are going to be pulling anyway, simply because she's such an aura farmer.